Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I have a flip video of Crafter's Companion subscription box number 46. This one's called Iris Folding. Here's a quick recap of the 5 cards that I'll be making in this video, and I will timestamp this video if you don't have the time to watch the entire thing because it is a longer one. That way, if there is one card that you see in particular and you want to see me make it, then you can just hover over the timeline and then click on that label and jump straight to that card. So being a flip video, I'll make at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card. And we will start with my flat card, so you're not going to see iris folding here, but you'll see that on my next card. Now, I wanted to challenge myself to try to embrace the spirit and the look of an iris folded card, but find a way to do it so that it's flat. And you don't get the bulk that you would normally get with the regular way that you would do an iris folded card. So what I've done is I attached some pattern papers, and in this case some solid color cardstock as well, to double-sided adhesive tape, and then I'm going to just place that behind the sections that I want in that color, and then I'll run it through my die cutting machine. So basically now I have stickers that I can attach to my card, and for the leaves, I just put some light cardstock or paper, and these are strips. You'll see them in a moment if you didn't see my unboxing, but they are strips that are provided for us to do the iris folding technique. And I just butt up two patterns against each other. Well, the one polka dot pattern and then the darker solid green. And when I positioned that paper behind my the tulip die, I just made sure that the seam was as centered as possible along the length of that leaf. So I feel like you really do get a pretty close approximation to the iris folding. You just don't get the dimension that is very clear and is part of what makes iris folding gorgeous. So there is that, but you do get the suggestion of iris folding and the pattern of it. Okay, so now I've got another bit of double-sided adhesive. I just cut this off of the 5-inch roll that I have, and I was trying to find a way to get this to stay still as I work on it, but being that it's on paper release liner, it's that's the beauty of paper release liner, it doesn't stick. But what I've done is I've just taken this is leftover actually from the next card you'll see, but I took some pattern paper that has this nice ombre, and I cut it into strips. Now these strips are about 1/4 of an inch, but to be honest, I didn't measure. What I realized as I started to place these down is that if you look at the pattern, which I know is off screen, but it's not equal with strips all the way around the sort of pinwheel pattern. There's some of these areas or segments, they are thinner on one end and wider on the other end. And so that's why I cut myself a couple of extra strips from this pattern paper that were a little bit wider. And then as I go to put down each of these segments, I just trim it. I just hand cut it so that I have one end that's thin and then one end that's wide. And the more narrow end is always on starting from that same point or the same side on each of these segments, and that way it sort of fans out, I guess is one way to describe it, where it's fanning out from the central point and then each of these segments gets wider on the other end. and I am overlapping a bit, and so there's going to be some trimming that I need to do for this pattern to really make sense, because some of my strips are kind of overlapping other areas, and but that's not a problem. I know it looks like a mess now, but I just put this behind the tulip portion, or the flower portion of my tulip, and run that through my die cutting machine. And so that'll clean up all the outer edges, but we still need to trim the inner edges. So you'll see where it's not held down by the adhesive tape, that's where you need to trim it. And actually what I found was you can actually pretty aggressively fold this back along those seams, along those edges, because I actually cut just a smidge too far in on one of them. You can kind of see it, even there's a little bit of a white border between two segments, and but I think you can get a cleaner cut if you fold it back more aggressively and then just cut along that seam. So I've got this really simple 4x4 card, and from some solid color cardstock, I use the same die to die cut out the tulip. And then I'm inlaying the tulip pieces that I just made that are stickers now, because they have the double-sided adhesive. I'm inlaying those back in. So all of this is well, according to my definition of a flat card, which is your card base plus at most one layer of cardstock. So this is just one layer of cardstock because we haven't folded any of the pattern paper, none of it overlaps, and because it's inlaid right back into the aperture that was cut out of the solid color cardstock, it's all one layer. It's all the same layer. So here's a quick comparison of a card coming up, of flat versus one that's got a lot more dimension going on. Okay, so now this is the fun part. This is the actual iris folding, and it's the only iris folding you will see in this video, because I this is actually the one kit where almost as soon as I opened the box, I crafted with it because iris folding is so new to me, and I was very, very eager to give it a try, and I love it. So it's not the fact that there's only this one card that features iris folding. It's not because I don't love the technique. It's because I like to try to challenge myself to use the same supplies in different ways. And that's important for any craft supply that I buy, because then I feel like I will use it more if I can see more ways to use it outside of how it's been designed to be used. And so I think that the other thing I want to try is actually look through my stash to see, now that I understand a little bit better what's involved with iris folding, I want to actually re-examine or look at the things that I have through the lens of, can I do some iris folding with that die? And so I always really love when Crafters Companion releases these boxes, these subscription boxes, because they are a little taste into like a different technique, a different concept. But I love exploring these different concepts, because then you kind of add another tool to your toolbox, and then, at least for me, it just helps me look at what I already have in a completely different way. So I do love iris folding, but I wanted to really try to use this set in different ways outside of iris folding, and so that's why you'll see different types of cards in this video. So these strips are 1 inch wide, and we get a really large stack of them. I mean, it's really, really generous, because on this one card alone, I only used the strips that you see me pull out here. I didn't actually have to pull out any more than what you see. And that first strip, I did hand fold it in half. But I didn't like how that looked, so I went and I scored each of these, and I watched a hunky-dory video on how to do iris folding, and the demonstrator, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she suggested using a glue stick to actually glue these strips down initially before you start applying them, and that's just genius because it makes them more flat. So that's one benefit right there. And second, they're a little bit easier to work with too, now that they're essentially feel like just one piece of cardstock. Now you do have to pay a little bit of attention to where that folded edge is, because that's the nicer looking edge, and you want that to butt up against the line that you see drawn on the template. And so this box has two designs. It's got the tulip and it's got some hearts that you'll see in my next on my interactive card. And so that's so you get two full options. And of course, I think Crafter's Companion has other Stampin' Die sets that are designed for iris folding in lots of different other patterns and shapes. Now, okay, so you're supposed to follow the numbers, which I don't do. And I, being the conservative crafter that I am, I actually cut down that 1-inch strip to 1/2 inch, and I folded that in half because look at these tiny little segments on this stem. So I thought it's just a waste of paper to use that, huge strip. So I cut it down so that now I'll be able to get more crafting out of what's left over. And also the pattern that they laid out for the stem goes straight across horizontally, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted a diagonal pattern. So that's what I did. So I feel like there's a lot of room for flexibility here. So if you see a pattern that you like better, then go with that. And I just couldn't resist kind of peering on the front side because we're working on the back side. So however messy this is, don't worry. But the other thing that I did that was different is, so you're supposed to follow the numbers, and technically number 1 is that darkest purple polka dot strip at the very bottom of the tulip. And when I looked at this, I thought, well, that's a weird place to start because the amount of space between the bottom of the tulip and the top of the stem is like itty bitty. It's maybe a 1/16 of an inch. So if you were to apply that first strip of cardstock there, you would have to trim it away so that none of that purple cardstock overlaps the aperture or the opening for where the stem and the leaves are. And that doesn't leave a lot to attach to your card panel. So I thought, well, I'm just going to do the leaves and the stem first, and that way I don't have to worry about trimming, because then they'll cover those aperture areas and I don't have to worry about trimming off that bit of cardstock at the bottom there. So I do feel like, these patterns are a suggestion. You can follow them to the T, you can follow the numbers as you wish, but I feel this way about pretty much everything. If the way that you're prescribed to do it, or the instructions for how to do something, there's some logic and some thought behind that. But if you see a different logic and you see a different reason for doing something, whether you see a way that's easier, faster, looks better, whatever it is, then I feel like go ahead and take those liberties, because what makes sense to one person may not make sense to another. What one person sees as easy might be hard for another person, and not everybody sees everything, the easiest way of doing something, So I do feel like, there's, you're not going to be left hanging without instructions. But that being said, if you find a different, better, easier, faster way of doing something, then, feel free to take liberties. And anyhow, so that's just, my approach to how I did this, and it may be a little bit different from how other people have done it. That's my way of saying that. I did add some of my low profile foam around all of that iris folding, because there is a bit of bulk that does get generated through that iris folding, because you have folded cardstock for one, and then second, they are overlapping each other quite a bit by the time you're done. And so I just use my low profile foam as a way of just trying to level out that bulk. I wasn't trying to really add dimension to the card, but certainly I think it would look good if you did add some thicker foam there. So I just added a sentiment, and I love that brush lettering font of the sentiments on in the stamp set that came with this box. I have just this piece of paper release liner here, and I'm pre-making some Nuvo drops because I have a hard time like picking colors and deciding where to put my drops. So I like to pre-make them. Also, some drops, and this is especially true of your vintage drops, they will dry kind of a different color. So I sometimes like to see it when it's perfectly dry to know what color it's going to end up being before placing it onto my card. So while that dries, I just quickly whipped up this extra little note card. This is 4x4, like the very first card, the flat card that I created. And these tulip pieces are what fell out of the mats and layers from my iris folded card. So this solid color cardstock does come in this box, but this pattern paper and all the pattern paper that you see me use in this video, they come from previous Crafter's Companion boxes, because this kit did not come with any 8x8 pattern papers, because instead we got the booklets of iris folding, those pre-cut 1-inch strips. And so we got that instead of pattern paper, but I really felt like my cards needed that extra, bit of pattern. So that's why I've pulled in things from outside the box. So now that my drops are dry, I can, and you, maybe it was hard to see, but the vintage drop really is a good match for that mid-tone purple that came in the strip. And so I added that and some green drops, and on this one I'll add some of the lighter drops. Also, if you are planning on putting drops onto an emboss panel like I'm doing here, I would definitely recommend pre-making them, because if you apply drops directly to an embossed panel, it may not, and I would venture to guess that it probably won't dry level because of the difference, in all of that texture that the embossing folder puts into your card. So that's another reason to pre-make your drops. Okay, so then I've pulled another piece of pattern paper. I think I used only solid color cardstock that came with this box. So this light pink paper did come in box 46, and this is the second pattern, iris folding pattern die that you have. But when I saw this, the first thing I thought was to make a shaker card, because the two hearts have that solid bit of cardstock between them where they overlap. And so that made me think that it would be cool to actually create two completely separate shaker wells, so that I can put different shaker bits in each of the hearts. So that was the first thing I thought of when I saw this. But I do want to go back and do the iris folding with this heart pattern, because I think it's gonna look really gorgeous. So I like to make, if you've ever seen me make a shaker card, you probably already know, but I like to make my shaker cards where the shaker is a completely enclosed separate element, so that I can more easily position it onto my card base. And that does end up meaning that I use an extra bit of acetate, but actually in this case I use vellum but you'll see that in a moment here. The key when you go to apply, however you want to make your shaker card, the key is that when you go to apply your foam, you want to completely enclose your shaker wells. Now, you don't have to do what I'm doing, where I've got these foam strips going as close to those aperture windows as possible. You really don't have to do that. I only do that because it sort of saves you a bit in shaker fill, because then you don't have shaker bits that are going to fall where they're not going to be visible, essentially. And so you don't have to put as much fill in, because basically whatever you put into these shaker wells will be visible. Whereas if you wanted to be and certainly it would be easier to create 2 shaker wells that are larger than those aperture windows for the hearts. That's totally cool. Just make certain that you're adding enough shaker fills so that when the shaker bits all fall to one end, you'll still have enough visible to have the effect that you want. So just bear that in mind. So now I like to go ahead and fill each of these wells, in this separate piece as you see it. And then I'm going to put another layer to close this off completely, and it'll be its own separate kind of element or unit that I can then attach to my card base. Especially with 2 different wells here, I just find it's going to be a lot easier to get the bits exactly where I want them. And these are really flat, so that's why I've only used 1 layer of foam, because they're confetti pieces. So in the top corner, it's this nice iridescent, I think it's more hexagonal shape. And then on the larger heart, the full heart, I have some sequins, but they're the flat ones. They're not very dimensional. And then I've got some confetti that also has a bit of that aurora borealis, because you can see sometimes those circle confetti pieces look one color and sometimes they look another color. So then once I've closed this off with vellum, I can really just focus on positioning it or centering it onto my card base. And when I did apply my adhesive on the back of that, I made sure to only put adhesive where you don't have the opening. That way you don't see any of that adhesive, because it is, even though it's vellum, you can still sometimes see adhesive through your vellum. And the reason why I chose vellum instead of a second layer or second piece of clear acetate is because I wanted to leave the pattern paper that's behind the hearts, but I wanted to kind of, it's already sort of a very soft pattern, so it's not overly busy back there anyways, but that vellum just helps to soften it all the more. And so it just makes the confetti bits pop out a little bit more. And then I just chose another sentiment. Again, love that brush lettering font of the word love. And I really like when stamps have, or sentiment stamps have, a combination of different font sizes and font styles, because I think it just adds it definitely adds interest, but then it also adds some sort of, I guess, focus to certain words or phrases within that larger sentiment. So I really love that look, that design. And I've just got some scrap pearlescent card that I thought would look really good with these pattern papers and the colors going on this card. And so I'll go ahead and get that attached. There is another die in the die set that we get in this box that will cut out all 3 of these hearts. So I cut it out from the same pattern paper that is on the back of my card panel here, but from the more purple end of the ombre. That way it stands out a little bit more on the front, because I do have so much pink going on. And so I thought the purple would be a nice contrast. And I've still got a lot of leftover drops from the earlier two cards. And I think, well, yeah, I think most of them coordinate, most of the purples anyways, coordinated well, but I decided I didn't want to use any of these. So instead, what I'm going to do, I found one pre-made, or a couple pre-made drops from, that must have been just from a different project that I had left over, but it's dream drops. And dream drops are great because they do have a little bit of that iridescent shine, and I thought that would go perfectly with the iridescent confetti bits that I have, just, you know, having that little bit of rainbow shine to it. So I decided to go with that. And when I put drops in a very specific pattern, then I feel a lot more confident going straight to my project. So that's why I did that this time. Okay, so now onto my final card. This will be, I used one of the 5x5 card panels or card bases, and I'm going to cut some mats and layers for the inside of my card because this will be my pop-up card. Now I'm cutting one all the way to 5 inches, but along the other edge, I'm actually trimming it like a smidge. I would say less than even a 1/16 of an inch. Shy of 5 inches, and that's because this is going on the inside of the card, so I want to make sure that it does not cross over the fold. That way this will fold down nicely. Okay, so then with my leftover bit of green cardstock here, I'm going to create a simple pop-up stand. So this first 1/2 inch is going to be a glue tab. The next 1.5 inches is the front of my pop-up. Then I decided on 1 inch, that's the depth, so that's how far this pop-up will be from the front to the back of the pop-up. And that's as simple as it is to create yourself a little pop-up stand. You'll see me attach that in a moment here. So I'm gonna first put on my light blue, and I believe this light blue cardstock did come in the kit. That's going to be my sky. This green cardstock is out of my stash, and this will be the grass, so to speak. And I forgot which end because they're so close, but I'm making sure that the edge that's just shy of 5 inches, that's what's butting up against the fold line here. And then I'm going to give myself a couple of tip marks because when I scored this piece, I mentioned that there's a 1 inch depth basically of how far out this pop-up will go, and so I'm just measuring that 1 inch from the fold of my card base, and I'm folding back that first glue tab because I want to line up that first score line with the 1 inch score, or the pencil tick that I made, and that's going to ensure that everything attaches correctly, because my ends, and you could make this easier. Instead of a 1/2 inch glue tab, you could make that 1/2 inch 1 inch, the same depth essentially as what you want. But I was just using some scrap paper, so I didn't know how much I would, if I had enough of the scrap piece to accommodate that. So that's why I just went with a safe 1/2 inch glue tab. But if you want to make it easy for yourself, you could do a full inch, representing the width of or the depth of your pop-up here, however high you want your pop-up to be, another inch for the depth again, and then another stretch that's the same as the height. And then that way everything is going to be kind of squared off, and it'll all line up perfectly with the fold of your card. But as I didn't do that, and that may be the case for you too if you want to just be using up your scraps, the key is that whatever depth you've scored for the distance between the back panel and the front of your pop-up tab, give yourself a little tick line, and that's how you'll know where to get that first tab glued down. And then from there, you just fold up your pop-up stand and then close your card down. And that will ensure that the second glue tab that glues to the top of the card is in the correct location. So now I want to make another little pop-up to extend beyond that first one. So I went with 1/2 inch glue tab, 1.5 inches for the height, another 1/2 inch. So here you have a complete rectangle, and you could do that. You could have done that with the other one too, and that ensures everything kind of meets up at the fold line, and that would be easier for placement. But like I said, if you're using up scraps, work with what you have, and there's a way to kind of do that. So here I've just folded that extra stand in half, and I glued down that first glue tab. The next two sections are free, and then I put glue on that fourth glue tab, and then I close my card down on it so that it gets kind of attached to the right location. So they're essentially the same pop-up sort of mechanism, just different size and dimensions and methods to just kind of use up what you have. And I thought it would be really cute to create a field. Is 3 flowers, 3 tulips, does that make up a field? But that was what I was going for, was a field of tulips, because there are gorgeous tulip fields where I live, or not that far from where I live, and you just see, like, as far as the eye can see, there are tulips in various colors. And so I thought it would be cute to kind of have a couple layers of or rows of tulips here. So that's on the inside of my card, and then I had to go back and figure out the front, which is always the case with my pop-up cards. So I'm just, again, picking and choosing from some scraps. So the lavender cardstock, I don't think I used that in any previous cards in this video, but that's a leftover scrap. And then the sort of the diamond shaped pattern paper is, again, scraps from a previous Crafter's Companion subscription box. There is another die, or a few dies actually, in this box that will cut out these cute little flowers. I chose to layer them up. I don't think you necessarily have to. They're not really, I don't think they're really designed to be kind of 3D flowers because they're so small. But I've just cut them out of 3 different shades of pink as just a little bit of contrast, because I wanted to use this pink ribbon, and ultimately I didn't use the ribbon, even though I took so much time to kind of tie it and get it just right. The ribbon does come in this kit, and that's why I wanted to use it. But at the end of the day, I kind of wish, because we only got the 1 ribbon size, and I kind of wish we had the smaller one, because that would have worked better on this card. But because of how wide the ribbon was and the resulting bow was larger than I felt made sense on this card, so that's why I didn't end up using it. So I just cut this strip of pattern paper and fishtailed the ends, and I'm adding just plain white cardstock to the top and bottom of this, and that's just to try to level this out as it gets applied across or on top of the solid color cardstock that runs across the card panel. And totally optional, but that just helps everything look a little bit more flush, a little bit more level. And then I've got my sentiment, gorgeous sentiment, and again, that lovely brush lettering. If friends were flowers, I'd pick you. I love that, and I think all of the sentiments in this subscription box are really great. They're nice, all-purpose, because they're not specific to any occasion or holiday or theme at all. Well, this one, I guess, has a floral theme to it, but for the most part, I think all the other sentiments are pretty general in a good way, because that makes them really usable. So I am going to just double up on these flowers just to give them a little bit of a sense of dimension, because I'm layering two different colors. I'm putting the darker die cut behind a lighter one. So that right there makes it seem like it's got more dimension, just because it seems like it's in shadow. And then I was just using what was left over. So this final flower actually has the lighter, the lighter die cut on the bottom. And I lost a little bit of footage because I ran out of memory on my card and didn't realize it. I kept crafting through it. But you'll see that card in its final form. The only thing I added to it was some of the gems that we got with the subscription box. I put those right in the center to finish off my flowers. So here's a final recap of all of the cards that I made. This one is the only true iris folding card, and I love the look of that. So I'm curious to try, as I mentioned earlier, looking at other dies in my stash to see what I can turn into an iris fold, and then also looking at other patterns that I can be creating, because I think at the crux of it, you kind of want that pinwheel pattern, but I'm curious to go back and try the heart one and follow the heart design to just see if that's really the case. And so here's my final card, the pop-up, so you can see all that fun dimension of my quote field of tulips. And I did add a white panel at the bottom, so I have a place to actually write a message and sign my card. I hope that you enjoyed these cards, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.